Good afternoon, this Thursday afternoon. My name's Ginny Lindsay and I'm the Principal Therapist at From 2 to 3 Relationship Counselling, supporting growing families from pregnancy right through to those early years when we've gone from a couple of two to now a family with young children and the change in the relationship dynamics that happen during this transitional phase of having a family. And one of the things I was having a discussion about this morning, which I thought I'd share with you, is about listening. We all think that we're good listeners, but it's actually a real art to be a good listener. And so I thought I just wanted to share some of this with you because for your relationship, I'm sure that if you practice your listening skills and really hone on these, it will make a huge difference. So I think a couple of things that were really standing out for me that I'd really love to share with you is that to be a good listener builds trust and intimacy. And this is all based on the John Gottman research that he's actually done. And so what we need to do is we need to prepare ourselves when we're going to be a good listener. And so there's several steps that are actually needed to do that. And the first one is to shift the focus away from myself. Now, I know my own agenda. I know what my thoughts are. But what I want to be able to do is try to start to understand what's actually going on for my partner or the person that I'm listening to. So the first thing is to shift the focus away from me. I then want to become interested in the other person, not interesting about talking about myself. So I want to be interested in the other person. I want to postpone my own agenda just for a while. So I'm going to put all my thoughts and everything about it over here. Not easy to do, but really necessary to do. And then I want to tune into my partner's world, okay? And I want to try and understand my partner from his or her perspective, okay? So what we now need to do is this means that we need to not minimize the other person's feelings, even if we don't. This is not necessarily about agreeing with the other person, okay? It's hearing the other person's perspective, it's hearing their pain, and even if we don't agree with the facts that we're actually hearing. So the goal, therefore, is to try and understand our partner. So we're going to do that by asking lots of questions. And we want to ask open-ended questions, questions that are really going to broaden out what does this mean for them, how do they feel if they get it. We want to avoid any judgment, any criticism, any blame. We don't want to be defensive. And we want to engage the other thing we don't want to do at all is ask or give any advice, okay? So we don't want to fix it. We don't want to give any advice. We're really all about trying to understand the other person. And we want to communicate respect to the other person. I think that's really important in how we do that. And we want to understand and communicate empathy to the other person. So what that's going to necessarily bring, it's going to bring up a lot of stuff for each of us as we're actually trying to do this process. So I'm asking you need to breathe, and you need to breathe again, and then you need to breathe again because we're trying to stay with the other person's agenda. And what we want to be able to do is we really want to be able to ask questions that are open-ended questions. So it's what's happening for you now? What concerns you the most at the moment? That's one big thing that's really important is what concerns you the most at the moment? Has something happened recently that has made you feel this way? What do you need at the moment and what can I do to try and help? They're really 4 questions that are always really useful. So what concerns you the most at the moment? Has something or what has happened recently that has caused you to feel this way? what do you need at the moment, and what can I do to help this sort of situation at the moment. So we then, when we're hearing their answers, we want to reflect them back. I think that's a big thing we want to do, because when we reflect back, we're taking it in ourselves, but we're also validating their experience, which allows them to open up even more. At that point, I'm not offering any other suggestions or advice or trying to fix it. I'm just trying to understand what's actually going on. So I'm trying to understand how my partner is saying. I'm looking for the emotional content that is underneath this. So as I'm hearing the story on the top, I'm also wanting to hear what is the emotion that is underneath. And that is going to get me in tune with what is actually happening for the person. So if we can actually do that and stay with them with open-ended questions, then that is really going to help them to feel validated. It's going to help them feel that we are understanding them. But we are, by opening it up, we are actually starting to understand their world. And quite often what I've found with my clients is where they actually end up of what they thought was the problem is quite different to where it ends up with what the problem actually is, because they've been able to really allow the other person to actually open up what's actually going on for them. So I would suggest that just be there to listen. The goal is to try and always understand, and we want to understand fully before we give any advice or they ask for it. So that's the key. We don't, just because we think we understand it, jump in to start giving advice on what we think we should do. We actually say, did you just want to offload? And I now understand what's actually going on, and that sounds really awful. Or are you actually wanting me to give you some suggestions? Because then it's the other person's prerogative to be able to turn around and say, no, I actually feel much better, and thank you so much for listening. And they often then feel a lot better and they feel heard. Resentment builds more often than not when one doesn't feel heard. So I hope you found that this is being helpful. And I'm going to do some other ones on listening to fear and listening to anger, listening to sadness, and then potentially I'm going to do some ones on some questions that you could actually start to open up. So I hope you found that this is helpful. It is an important part of a relationship on how to be a good listener. Have a fantastic afternoon, and I'll see you and speak to you soon.